Sorry, my brain is like, ah. My brain-
Hokoto Fuji. This is Terry from At the Heart of a Wise Practice. You're catching me at the Crotona Theosophical Institute in Ojai, California. I'm here to study for a few days on the esoteric philosophy of theosophy. That's a mouthful. Today, we're going to have a conversation about the Enneagram, specifically the Riso-Hudson Enneagram Type Indicator. It's a personality test. It has 9 types to it, and there's 144 questions that you answer. So I got my colleagues Ed Sue and Kristen Lindstrom to take it with me, and we decided to dive in and look at this personality test and how we identify with it. And more importantly, in terms of clinical relevance, how do we use this information to approach our patients and clients with more efficiency, more space, and more availability to help them continue on their healing journey. Place your comments or your questions below and hit the share button if you think it would be relevant for other clinicians to support their clinical practice. All right, guys. Namaste, blessings, and here we go.
Well, today is Tuesday, December 10th, 2024, and I'm here with my esteemed colleagues, brother and sister, Kristen Lindstrom and Terry Kim. Thank you, guys. Yes, thank you for joining. So we thought we'd share our experiences with the Enneagram and just the results of our Enneagram. I guess, can you guys define the Enneagram?
Ooh, it's a kind of personality typing.
Yeah, it's just an inventory. It's pretty comprehensive, pretty robust. And repeating the test over time, how you can see how we start to change and evolve over time. And acknowledge, where you tend to sit in what domain. The other thing I want to say about it is that it actually shows not only where you are in your highest domains, but also shows you where you go when you're under stress. We took it for personal inventory, to develop ourselves. And I think the next strategy is to understand how we are able to utilize what we've learned about ourselves and how we face clinical care and how we interface with our own predilections or how to meet them in appropriate fashion to expedite the process of healing for them.
Really, I really liked how it broke down kind of the levels of development, like kind of the healthy levels, average levels, and unhealthy levels. And I could see different times in my life where I've maybe kind of fit into, those different categories. And I'm not sure if I read it so much in this summary, but in a book that I was listening to, it really resonated with kind of like my personality type is a 7 for these like first half of my life, and then how it has evolved and changed and looking for deeper meaning. And that was really interesting to see kind of this a little bit of a transformation in that personality type, and then opportunities for really kind of highlighting opportunities for personal growth and to kind of continue on that pathway of being kind of in a healthy level of that personality.
Kristen, can you share again the type 7 that you mentioned?
Yeah, so the type 7 is the enthusiast. So someone who's kind of always looking ahead and planning and anticipating and likes to kind of dabble in everything, and sometimes stays very busy. And sometimes that's at the detriment of being able to kind of sit with yourself in silence and kind of go inward and face difficult situations or conflict or pain, kind of using that elated, exuberant sense of self and exploration to kind of mask and cover up other deeper emotions. And I definitely have seen that in myself and
Your two other top, so the top three are the Peacemaker and the Achiever as well.
hmm
And how do you identify with those top three?
I think in the as far as the peacemaker, definitely someone who tries to avoid conflict in that ways. It's like kind of trying to just make sure everybody's happy and cared for, having a little bit more of a challenge of being, confrontational or direct and addressing issues kind of head on.
Mhm. Let me throw out one of the adjectives for you and tell me if this makes sense to you.
Or the
Um,
peacemaker.
yeah, so Peacemaker is in the personality type is a number 9. So on Enneagram, it goes from 1 to 9. Complacent.
Yeah, it's interesting. Complacent in some ways, like not wanting to rock the boat or cause a big, yeah. And then in some ways, kind of not addressing maybe not addressing things because they just don't want to rock the boat or cause too much
Mm.
commotion, just kind of trying to stay the path. And sorry, what were the other ones that you said there?
I was saying resigned and stubborn.
It definitely can be stubborn. Kind of sometimes, well, stubborn and kind of seeing, and especially in the past, seeing things kind of my way and maybe not being as open to truly listening to others and seeing things from their perspective. Kind of like having my set way of viewing something and kind of even if I am listening, not being really open to it, but just kind of listening to listen, but I'm still keep maintaining my mindset.
Right. So these are adjectives that get 9s into conflict, and I'm curious. So professionally, when you're not at your best, do you find that that comes into play for you when you're in a patient interaction with some individuals who might challenge that aspect of complacency or stubbornness to move or be motivated to move or to listen or
Hmm. Yeah, I think how to answer that. Sorry, my brain is like, my brain trying to think of an example, but can you say it again?
yeah, so we sometimes find ourselves struggling in patient care. We come out frustrated or disillusioned or like
Mm,
we want to give up, right? Or there's just some
mm,
fighting. The fighting might be our own internal struggle to reach. And so the conflict that peacemakers get into is sometimes they become emotionally unavailable or they're not attentive and sometimes unaware of their own struggle on the inside, but we can face it out into the patient and we can do it through resignation and complacency, right? As an example. And I was just curious if you had noticed those feelings or ways of being in on your clinical practice showing up.
mm. I guess sometimes in complacency, I think sometimes I have these expectations of how things are going to go.
Hmm.
I guess expectations for myself and how I'm kind of performing or addressing the patient or what I'm giving them, as well as expectations in their progress and their healing. And if that's not, sometimes I notice that that's not being met, I become complacent. Like what kind of like, well, what's the point of this? Actually, for me, sometimes it kind of breaks down that communication. I just feel like maybe I'm not able to give what I need, and we're kind of just going through the motions, and they're not responding in the way that I was hoping that they would. And I kind of like, yeah, become complacent and kind of like lose the energy for that kind of motivation to be creative and continue in a different way.
What,
Mm-hmm.
when you started to kind of like think in the very beginning and you weren't able to articulate, my question would be like, how did you feel?
Mm.
Like, what was the feeling you were noticing arising?
I feel like with the in my I feel like a constriction, like a embarrassment almost, and
Mm,
um, inadequacy of
mm,
being able to kind of formulate and articulate things
wow.
in my brain, which I think is again has just been like, especially the past few years, has just been very, very much at the forefront in this kind of like brain fog and yeah, brain fog kind of concentration challenges that I've been having. So yeah, I have there's like a lot of fear and anxiety sometimes being in a position like this where like not being able to necessarily prepare for what's being asked of me and like yeah, being kind of on the spot. Like I mean, I think it's that's never that's in my past hasn't been like one of my strongest suits, but it's more, I feel it more acutely now, like having to kind of come up with something on the spot. And I,
Mm,
you know, it's like I could, and then for when you first asked it, I'm like, I could just start talking about something, but am I really understanding the question? And so
mm,
do I have a appropriate answer? You know, I think that's where I get
right.
kind of stuck. And so I always appreciate you offering it or explaining it kind of again and offering it a different light. And there's stuff to realize, you know, again, it's kind of the perfectionist that comes in, like, am I saying the right answer? And, you know, I think it's, we're just, okay, it's, I'm not being judged on this, just
Mm,
being, working
right.
on communicate, just communicating to the best of my ability.
Well, one thing I want to echo for you that you just said a second ago was that you paused. That's what I
Mm,
was aware of, was like there was this pause. You didn't just jump into a canned response. We know how to do that very well. And it takes a lot of energy to be able to like, well, let me just put that aside for a moment and really, what is this about me and how I relate to other people?
mhm,
So I consider that to be pretty powerful. I think it's incredibly courageous, and and again, we've often talked about, the three of us, about how we use the strength of vulnerability to find our heart, and the space between that, where it's quiet and you have a moment where you can actually settle yourself a little bit and come down, and you articulated it so well. I mean, it's really beautiful to just acknowledge the fact that there are these self-limiting beliefs that we've lived with our whole life, really. It's just a part of who we are, and to give it some air and breath and acknowledge it, and to see that actually, I don't know if it really serves me as well anymore in this life, to be thinking
yeah.
that I have to be a perfectionist and I'm judging constantly myself against the world, and the worry that I'm not going to be enough, this not enoughness, this itis.
Mhm,
And so I think that's beautiful, what I'm hearing. Ed, do you want to throw in?
yeah.
Yeah, just to follow on Terry, I mean, Kristen, that was very articulate and beautifully said. And just as I'm looking at the top three Enneagram numbers, Kristen, that you had scored on, just following on what Terry said, as the enthusiast, Kristen, I mean, you're receptive, you're quiet in a way that you're contemplating, you're not jumping into things, you're taking your time to think about it, you're inner directed, you're authentic, um you're self-accepting, you're well adjusted, and that's with the achiever. And then the peacemaker, you're self-aware, you're contemplative. Again, you're looking within, you're not jumping in, you kind of gathering the, as long as I've known you, you've always taken pause and gathered all the information that's presented to you. So I've always respected you for that. I always thought, wow, she's not getting reactive. She's kind of taking it in and assessing and processing, and then coming with a really well thought out, articulate um, response or um, reflection on what's presented. So I recognize that and I see you for that. So just as I'm reading, I mean, it's kind of crazy how accurate this Enneagram is for all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I was reading
It
mine
really,
again, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Who needs therapy? I'm just gonna read that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes.
But again, it
yeah.
just Kristen, again, you articulate really well.
Yeah.
And I know you shared some of the struggles, but it's like, but I'm reading this and I'm like, this is totally you, you know.
Mm.
And and it is nice to have this thing laid out for us, or for people who take this test as just kind of a guide, right? To kind
Mhm.
of help us not just with our professional relationships, like Terry, you're kind of suggesting how does it, and it is a great tool. How do we work with our clients, our patients, our colleagues, and also in our personal relationships too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the relationship is to the I first, right? Always. It's the self-responsibility and the accountability for what's on this side of the boundary, what's this, here before we can fully immerse ourselves in the world outside. Just to piggyback on those elements about you, Kristen, is dare I say this is to be meant in a very holistic, loving way, is that there's a sensuousness about you. There's an energy about you that is held close. It's like there's this space where, like, if it just cracks, and it's like,
Mm.
it's just like, light's just gonna like come all the way out, and you're gonna be, 60 feet tall and 29 feet wide, and weigh 1,000,000 pounds. At your highest best is that you can become self-possessed,
Mm.
feeling autonomous and fulfilled, having great equanimity and contentment because you're present for yourself fully. They say paradoxically, at one with self, and thus able to form more profound relationships, intensely alive, fully connected to self and others. You like unity and harmony. That's the peacemaker
Yeah.
in you. That's true. That's my experience of you. You're really good at mediating. You can mediate between two, and you bring a sense of comfort and reassurance. Yes. The hidden side of Kristen. The other thing about this, like coming back and having these conversations with you too, is to revisit this and to realize, wow, I missed a whole lot of what's in here. There's so much
There's
information in
so much.
here.
Yeah.
It's
There's a lot.
And
Yeah.
so to be able to kind of like come back and re-leaf through it again, I pick up so much more
Yeah.
in
It's
this
good to,
experience.
yeah, it's interesting to explore the 9 because I've been so focused on the 7, that's my primary type. So yeah, it's interesting to see these
Yeah,
kind of other
it's
variations.
fascinating, but their hidden side is often
Mm-hmm.
suppressed, and a huge well of anger. I don't know if you've read this, but this is interesting.
Mm-mm.
And I've not read this
Right.
until we were talking earlier, that they can even conceal the anger from themselves. Nines want to get along with others, but they also want to hold on to their independence and autonomy. They do not want to be messed with. And to the extent that they feel they cannot do the latter without endangering their connections with the important people in their lives, they become resentful and enraged. Although they also feel that they can never let this anger out without destroying relationship. So for nines to develop themselves and their potentials, they must come to grips with their suppressed rage and find constructive outlets of energy for this energy. I don't know how that lands for you. In saying and speaking this to me, I feel a little bit of trepidation. When you see things like anger and suppression, that, it sometimes touches a chord, is quite uncomfortable. And I can speak for myself in that arena, that it was quite
Mm.
uncomfortable for me. And having enough now repetitions under my belt, anger for me is not an issue to recognize within me.
I wonder, and I know, Kristen, you've shared with us in other conversations about, especially the last few years, and so much has happened in the world, with COVID and wars and politics and what Terry just read for the number 9 Peacemaker, the hidden side, does that, just to follow up on his question of how does this land for you, does that explain what you're going through in terms of the last few years, or exploring the shadow side? I know we're focusing on you today mainly, but I also have the Peacemaker as my second as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
when I hear Terry read that and I reflect on Kristen, and then I cannot help but reflect on myself too, and um and the inner rage. And I just wonder, just in light of what you've been sharing about the struggles of just the world, does this land for you anywhere in that, or is that kind of a separate, like the external world and then the
Right.
internal world, you know what I'm saying? And
I absolutely, I completely relate to what you're saying, because when Terry was reading it, I was kind of thinking of like, okay, I'm trying to think of relationships and anger and rage, um, with that. And I mean, I could see some things, like maybe even at work, in our work group, when there was, some challenging people and their behavior, I definitely would feel a kind of an anger rage coming. um I would notice that in myself, with feeling like, yeah, other people's behavior that was affecting me. But what I first thought of was, yeah, more a kind of on a external global, like I feel this, anger and rage with the world, and people's, disregard of what's good, what's good for people, and again, just capitalism and profit and those kinds of things. I feel like the anger and rage, just when thinking about, yeah, when thinking about all of those topics that you mentioned. um but it's like I feel it, and then I get overwhelmed, I feel like, and then I kind of get complacent, because that overwhelm just kind of takes over, and I'm just like, what, I start to think, what is my role, what can I really do? Feel like, yeah, maybe there is some anger inside me that's that I'm suppressing and building, because I don't let out anger very often, I would
Mm.
say.
I actually don't ever remember you once being angry.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I mean, we spent a lot of time together, so daily.
Yeah.
I think I would hear
I can't.
frustration, but the
Sure.
frustration
Yeah.
was always kind of tempered with this, what I would consider to be, I would say back then would be healthy, because you're kind of taking perspective instead of being emotionally forward. Like I always talk about that the adolescent adult comes out in us. But I always find that you've been relatively even keeled and a cheerleader, and someone who was always keen to step in and be a part of the process, and to get people rallied. That's always kind of been the persona that I saw of you.
The areas where I've noticed anger like come out actually is mostly with like the kids, getting angry with them for certain things, like little things, having to tell them, or getting their shoes on, or getting out the door, or whatever, stuff like that, where I'm just like, ah. But yeah, otherwise I don't really see so much of that anger come up in my life. Okay, so sorry, what were you guys talking about while I was
Oh, we were just giving you examples of, the people that you sit with who have the same notions, and Princess Grace of Monaco and Claude Monet and Carl Jung and Carl Rogers and Joseph Campbell. I mean, um,
Whoopi
uh,
Goldberg and
well,
Marge Simpson. Wait, Homer and Marge
Homer and
Simpson,
Mark, both of them.
both of them, peacemakers. Well, you had shared some words too. I mean, even though it's external, and there's definitely an external influence. You said the conflicts that number 9's peacemakers will face is complacency, and and maybe being resigned, or maybe being unaware of your own anger, or I don't know, it says passive aggressive.
Oh, I can do that sometimes.
I can do that. I can definitely do that as well.
Me too.
But it is interesting to see again, and in light of you have shared, you're also doing a lot of shadow work, and as we all, it would probably behoove all of us to do shadow work, and this is laying it out.
Yeah.
The report is, I think it's great if people, I'm glad we did this, took the test, and I know,
Read this about somebody we know and love, but also watch the process of the digestion of it, and these are just conditions. That's how I see it today, is so we can change our conditioning if we choose. And that's why these inventories can be very powerful if they're used appropriately, and if they resonate too. And I think for the three of us, this resonates deeply. And I would also think that the thread of this is that because we do Gestalt practice as well, it supports that process to be able to sit in the hot seat, right? Because we've all sat in the hot seat. We've all exposed ourselves to levels of vulnerability that we probably hadn't shared in a lifetime. The three of us have witnessed that together. That's real love. In looping back around how this inventory personally supports you, and how to use this as a way of facing the clinical day, what would be kind of the takeaways for you, or use it as a great tool?
That is a great question, Terry. And I feel like I've been trying to gather all of this knowledge or kind of read all these things that I resonate with. And then it's like moving it to the next stage, which is, reflecting and then integrating something different has been, I think, a challenge, and really one of the big frustrations that I've had with myself is like, okay, I have this knowledge there, and now how do I assimilate it? How do I make change of maybe being resigned or frustrated or feeling like, oh, I can't do it. And then getting frustrated that like, okay, I've spent all this time on this, and like, why am I not using it to grow? That's frustration of mine in many different aspects. So I'm aware of that. But it kind of leaves me with a feeling of, again, inadequacy, or not fulfilling what my desires are with growth, feeling kind of stagnant.
Okay.
And again, then it gets to kind of that overwhelm, and then a little bit of like shut down here. And then it's hard to like process and kind of think and formulate a it's difficult to kind of express what I'm not even actually sure what I'm thinking. That's the trick. It's all swirling in there. I mean, I guess what I took from earlier reading, and again, I was kind of more focused on the seven, and kind of the kind of sometimes restlessness and choices that I feel, like the overwhelm that I feel when I'm when I'm face to face with a patient right now. And what I have been trying to focus on is truly listening. And that's something that is a challenge sometimes for sevens, because you're always kind of thinking, planning ahead. That is what I've noticed I've always done. It's just like, as they're talking, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? What kind of exercises am I going to give them? To really sit and listen and not think anything. And I catch myself. Sometimes I catch myself. But yeah, so I think just kind of sitting and really listening, and not having kind of that planning, and that the planning and the expectations from the beginning, being okay with doing less. I think that's the other thing I notice is there's so many things I want to show them. There's just like this and the body and this and this and this. No, I don't want to forget this. And I realize like I've gone from here to the end of the appointment and I've given them so much information. Just trying to be kind of more focused on their needs, asking them their needs, listening, to cater to that instead of what all my needs and expectations are to get out to them. Like, oh, I feel like I need to do all of these things. I've expressed that before. Just, oh, I need to chart all of this, and I need to make sure I cover everything on that first visit. It's just been too much. I don't know if that answered your question.
You answered the question for yourself in that process. And if I can just add a little bit of support to that,
Yes.
is words that pop out for me is no expectations, listening, genuine listening, to be listening fully with them, completely attentive to that, and just being okay with being. I think that what I'm hearing is that you are being, you in this moment, you are reflecting that this is what I'm in service for, is not to go through the old rubric of all the things that we have listed for every little problem that we deal with every day. Less is more, and really coming back to the KISS principle and not having expectation. It greases the wheels for you, Kristen, and I think for all of us, because we're all learning something together, right? I feel that's a very strong element of why I like these conversations, because I find a bit of myself here too. So going,
Yeah.
wow, I mean, I can actually let my guard down and say words that I would not normally utter in other, relationships. And I think because we have a long-standing relationship of a few decades and more, that there was a certain built respect and trust. I mean, it's such a gift, and to know that, I say this often and frequently, that there are no coincidences, that there is a very, very specific reason why people come into our lives. And when we see the beauty of that individual and the spark and the willingness and the want, then you have to hold on to it. You have to nurture it. You have to give love and pour love, like we would pour love into the circle when we're in Esalen. That's just why we go there. And you feel your heart open up when you're there. And you can accept life as it's presenting itself from minute to minute. I would support you a whole 110%, Kristen, in letting go your expectations and really fostering and continuing to cultivate the aspects of genuine listening and regard for the other person. And one ad I would put in there is to actually ask them, what do you think you need? What would you like to get out of your session with me? And how do you feel about this? So you give them their full agency. That's what I believe the master is, the masterful way. I'm going to say master. But the wise practice is that element, is we give it over to them so that we just are the conduit and the witness for the healing process. And that's not an easy thing, in practice, because you got 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour. But so what? You make the time as it is, and whatever you get done, you get done. But the whole focus is on the heart of the individual, because that's where the healing is for the vast majority, even if they're not aware of that. But you see it. That's the key, is that you see it. You see them deeply, and your capacity to reach into that space and touch it once. Who knows? You might change worlds just by that one session. And that's the gift you have. Ed, you want to say something? And then we'll give the last word to Kristen.
Yes. Well, beautifully said. I mean, and Kristen, just as I'm looking at kind of the integration part of the reports for the 3 Enneagrams that you scored high for, it sounds like you're on the right path, and there's no rush. You're taking your time, and you're growing, and you're transforming, and it's beautiful to be witness to. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm just reading this. Yeah, integration of 7s going to healthy 5 as 7s learn to relax and tolerate their uncomfortable feelings completely. They stop using their restless minds to distract themselves. Their minds become clear, focused, allowing them to tap more deeply into their reserves of creativity and insight. Yeah, I feel like I'm in a state of where things are life is a little more distracting, and it's been, and then it's kind of, yeah, it's been hard to sit with that. When I have quiet time, I notice how I just want to find something to do, move my body, find something to do.
But take comfort that you see that and
Exactly.
you're aware of that. You know?
Yeah.
But I haven't
Yeah.
always changed it. That's the thing. Like, oh, maybe I should just sit here and journal. And then I'll start for like a few minutes. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should go for a walk.
All good
And
things.
then I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I appreciate your guys' reflections and questions and making me question myself deeper. Um, it's beautiful to hold this space with you guys and
Yeah. Thank you.
and
Thank
yeah,
you.
I feel like a lot of times this is like, oh, this is like a therapy session, right?
Yeah, it doesn't cost you a thing. Tough to pay $300 for 90 minutes anymore, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, well, I know, Kristen, you got to go. So thank you for, yeah, like Terry said, thanks for allowing yourself to have this deep dive. And I was going to say the hot seat, but the love
Yeah.
seat.
Love seat.
Yeah.
The love seat. Yeah.
I kind of like that.
The
Maybe.
love seat. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that more than the hot seat.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for making it, feel safe and comfortable to be in that. And yeah, allowing me to feel like I can really pause and ask the questions again and not, keep it calm. I don't need that anxiety to rise and
Yeah.
a safe space with you guys. And
Yeah.
Go.
Well, thank you.
gratitude to you both.
All right, folks.
Okay.
Beautiful, wonderful session. And I look forward to our next inculcation with the Ed next time, huh?
Looking forward to it. Okay,
All
you
right, guys.
Love you guys.
Live long and prosper.
Long and prosper.
All right. Love you guys too. All right. Bye-bye.